cranial nerves. Okay, these are going to be the mixed cranial nerves. They've got lots of different functions, and the functions are both sensory and motor. That's why they're called the mixed cranial nerves. All right, so your mixed cranial nerves, the first one, going to be a big one. This is cranial nerve number 5. Okay, cranial nerve number 5. Does anybody remember the name? Trigeminal. So cranial nerve number 5. And when we drew cranial nerve number 5 before, we drew it over here. It's one that arises out of the pons, and specifically it arises out of the lateral pons. So here's cranial nerve number 5. Trigeminal nerve. We're going to say it comes out of the pons. So, as far as sensory function for cranial nerve number 5, cranial nerve number 5, trigeminal, is going to be mostly sensory. It has a little bit of motor function, but it has a huge sensory function. Okay. To represent general sensation, I'm going to use this blue color, okay, just a darker blue color, and it's going to be general sensation of the face. So general sensation of your whole face. Okay, 3 different visions we're going to talk about, but right now you just need to know whole face. Okay, your external ear, so the external portion of your ear. Okay, the white part of your eye, which is your cornea. This is all just general sensation. Can you feel somebody touching you? Okay, general sensation. Also your nasal and oral cavities. So can you feel something touching the inside of your nose or the inside of your mouth? Nasal and oral cavities. General sensation for the anterior 2/3 of your tongue. So can you feel somebody touching the anterior 2/3 of your tongue? Okay, that's all general sensory information. It's a lot of information coming in through cranial nerve number 5. So general sensation of your face, of your external ear, of the cornea of your eye, your nasal and oral cavities, and the anterior 2/3 of your tongue. All cranial nerve number 5. So a lot of generally sensory information coming from the head area. Okay. The next color that I'm going to use is I usually, if you want to use like a light blue or an aqua if you have it, something like that, just as long as you're consistent when we get to the nuclei later on. Okay, this color is going to represent proprioception. For muscles of mastication. Temporalis, medial lateral pterygoids. We'll write those down here in a minute. So that's just going to be sensory information coming in. So it's just proprioception information coming from muscles of mastication. Okay, and then as for, that's all sensory. The motor coming in is going to be motor or motor function. So red color for muscles of mastication. So it innervates muscles of mastication. So that would be your temporalis, your masseter, your medial and lateral pterygoid,
what was that last one?
pterygoid. P-T-E-R-Y-G-O-I-D. Pterygoid. Yeah. Pterodactyl. Okay, medial lateral pterygoid. Okay. Okay, cranial nerve number 5, trigeminal, comes out of the lateral pons. It has a huge sensory function. Essentially all the general sensation coming from your face, your outer ear, your cornea, nasal and oral cavities, and the anterior 2/3 of your tongue. That's all general sensory information. Also have proprioceptive information coming in from muscles of mastication. Those are the sensory components. One small motor component is it innervates muscles of mastication, which include masseter, temporalis, medial lateral pterygoids. Okay? Okay. Any questions about cranial nerve number 5, your trigeminal? All right, moving on over to the next mixed cranial nerve number 7. It's going to be your facial nerve. To make it easy to see, I'm going to put my midline back in. Here's my dots. Okay. So where cranial nerve number 5, trigeminal, is mostly sensory, cranial nerve number 7 is mostly motor. Okay, it has a small sensory function, small component that's sensory, but the majority of it's going to be motor function. Okay, cranial nerve number 7 is going to come here. On that before, so this is cranial nerve number 7, mostly motor. Its origin is going to be the pons. Okay, mostly motor function, and the motor, I'm going to color in red, and this is going to be muscles of facial expression. Okay, muscles of facial expression. So if I asked you to smile, raise your eyebrows, puff out your cheeks, all that would be the responsibility. Close your eyes really tight. That would be responsibility of cranial nerve number 7, your facial nerve. It also innervates a small muscle in your ear known as stapedius. Okay, your stapedius muscle is going to be responsible for dampening sound coming in. Muscles of facial expression and stapedius are both possibilities. Now I'm going to go to a black color. Okay, things that are black in color are going to be glandular functions. Okay, cranial nerve number 7, facial nerve, has a glandular function. It innervates your lacrimal glands, so tear glands. Responsible for tear production. Lacrimal glands. It's also going to innervate your sublingual and submandibular salivary glands. So, production of saliva, specifically your sublingual and submandibular salivary glands. Okay, cranial nerve number 7 innervates glands. lacrimal glands, as well as the sublingual and submandibular salivary glands. Okay, that's going to be the motor function. And then we're going to move down to a little bit of a sensory function, just a little bit. It's going to be the blue color, so it's going to be just a general sensation. General sensation for the ear canal. So in other words, can you feel something touching your ear canal? Cranial nerve 5, external ear, move just a little bit medial, you've got your ear canal, that's cranial nerve number 7, as far as general sensory is concerned. Okay, I'm going to switch over to a new one. The purple is going to indicate taste. Okay, cranial nerve number 7 is going to be responsible for taste from the anterior 2/3 of the tongue. Okay, where trigeminal is responsible for general sensation coming from the anterior 2/3 of the tongue. Facial is responsible for taste coming from the anterior 2/3 of the tongue. Okay, trigeminal mostly sensory, a little bit of motor. Facial mostly motor with a little bit of sensory. Complement each other. Question, Gabby? It's more like an aqua color, so it's not an autonomic function. Yeah, it's a proprioceptive. It's a sensory function. Yeah, the green, the flat out green, it might be difficult to see there, but that's actually an aqua color. It's just picking another kind of blue. It's sensory. General sensation. So like, can you feel somebody touching your face? Can you feel somebody touching the outside of your ear? No, that is general sensation. Kind of like STT sensation. You know, can you feel somebody touching? It's basic rock gut sensation. Can you feel that? Okay? You're welcome. Yes. It's not sensation. You can consider it, but it's not green because it's coming from a different nucleus, and you'll see that later. So right now I'm just trying to get you to associate the function with a color, and then those nuclei are going to have colors. All the different functions come from different nuclei. Okay, any other questions? There's a lot of different functions here for cranial nerves that you need to be aware of, and these are your mixed cranial nerves. So 5 and 7 are relatively easy. Let's go ahead and move on down here. Cranial nerve number 9. This is your glossopharyngeal. Glossopharyngeal nerve. We talked about it coming out of the medulla here. We didn't really talk about exactly where. It arises from the medulla, and it's going to be the lateral medulla, and it's actually that space between the olive and the rest of the medulla, and it has a name. It's called your post-olivary sulcus. So medulla, specifically the post-olivary sulcus. Kind of like trigeminal, glossopharyngeal has more sensory functions than it has motor functions. Okay, so 5 and 9 are mostly sensory with a little bit of motor. So I'm going to go back to the blue color, and it's going to be for general sensation. So general sensation of the posterior 1/3 of the tongue. So cranial nerve number 5 does the anterior 2/3. The posterior 1/3 is cranial nerve 9. Posterior 1/3, just general sensation of the tongue. Okay, so if somebody puts something in your mouth, in the back of your mouth, the posterior 1/3 of your tongue, can you feel that touching you? Okay, that's going to be the first part of the general sensory. It's also going to be responsible for something known as your naso and oropharynx. So you have your oral cavity, and then the next part down as you go to swallow is something known as your pharynx. So your pharynx has two parts. There's a naso and an oral part. Naso and oropharynx. Okay, and that's nothing more than the next section down at your throat, essentially. So you're not still. Okay, there's going to be one more general sensory. So cranial nerve number 5 does the external ear. Okay, cranial nerve number 7 does your ear canal. Going more medial, the next part of that ear canal is known as your middle ear. Your middle ear is where those bones are, the small hearing bones. So your middle ear. So just general sensation in your middle ear, the area from your middle ear. Another sensory is going to be taste, so I'm going to go back to purple. And in addition to general sensation from the posterior 1/3 of the tongue, cranial nerve number 9 is responsible also for taste from the posterior 1/3 of the tongue. And so taste is going to be a sensory, posterior 1/3 of the tongue. And it's also responsible for innervating something known as the carotid body. C-A-R-O-T-I-D B-O-D-Y. Have you guys learned about that in physiology yet? No? Does anybody know what the carotid body is or what it does? No?
Is that also purple?
Yes, that's purple. Yes, this is all purple. It's a sensation. It's sensation. So the carotid body is responsible for detecting concentrations of different things in your blood. It's responsible for oxygen levels, carbon dioxide levels, and pH, those sorts of things. So, yes, Ben?
Sorry.
That's all right.
So is the carotid body a taste or a sensory?
Purple. It's a sensory.
Well, purple you told us was taste, blue was general.
So So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get you to associate the color with a function. And if you want to consider the carotid body as taste, that's okay.
Okay. Yeah.
So, yeah, it's coming from the taste nucleus, essentially. So I'm trying to get you to, that as long as you know that taste from the posterior 1/3 of the tongue and carotid body are both innervated by cranial nerve number 9, and that's one of the sensory functions for that cranial nerve. Okay, a lot of sensory functions. Carotid body is kind of an outlier, but you'll see it's coming, it uses a nucleus that's involved in taste. Okay, questions? Yeah. The carotid body is it's an area at where your common carotid bifurcates. There's just a small area there, and its job is to detect concentrations of different things in your blood. Carbon dioxide, oxygen levels, pH levels, all of those are detected by the carotid body. Yeah, pretty sure you'll cover it in physiology, but I think the timing's a little different this year. Any other questions? Okay, and that's going to be all the purple there. Now we're going to move on to the motor. Okay, cranial nerve number 9 has, like I said, a small motor function, so this is going to be voluntary motor. So I'm going to use a red color, and it innervates the stylopharyngeal muscle. And this is just one of the muscles. It's actually a very small muscle that's involved in swallowing. You'll see that cranial nerve 9 and 10 are both involved in swallowing. Cranial nerve 9 has just a small component of that swallowing function, and that's the stylopharyngeal muscle. Bless you. And there's also another small motor function where the facial nerve, cranial nerve number 7, was responsible for lacrimal gland, sublingual, and submandibular. Cranial nerve number 9 is going to be responsible for innervating something known as your parotid gland, P-A-R-O-T-I-D. And that's black, and that's just saliva production. So it's another gland that's involved in saliva production that's innervated by cranial nerve number 9. Parotid, cranial nerve 9. Submandibular, sublingual, cranial nerve number 7. Cranial nerve number 7 also has lacrimal gland function.
Dr. Byron,
Yep.
did you say the stylopharyngeal is a swallowing muscle?
Yes, it's a muscle involved in swallowing. It's the only muscle, voluntary muscle, that cranial nerve 9 innervates. Cranial nerve number 10 will innervate all the rest of the muscles involved in swallowing. Any other questions? Okay. Now, moving on to the last one then, cranial nerve number 10. This is vagus. Okay, your vagus nerve is going to come out of, it's just on the cranial nerve number 9. This is vagus here. Again, vagus is going to arise from the medulla. Specifically, just like cranial nerve number 9, it's coming from the post-olivary sulcus. I mentioned that glossopharyngeal, cranial nerve number 9, was mostly sensory and a little bit of motor. It's going to flip for cranial nerve number 10 again. Cranial nerve number 10 is going to be mostly motor and a little bit of sensory. Okay, so 7 and 10, mostly motor. 5 and 9, mostly sensory. Okay. As far as motor function for the vagus nerve, I'm going to go back to the voluntary motor, red color, and it's going to be muscles of the soft palate, your pharynx, and your larynx. Okay, muscles of the soft palate, your pharynx, and your larynx. And muscles of the pharynx are going to be the majority of muscles that you're going to use for swallowing. And your larynx is nothing but your voice box. Okay, so they're just back there. Okay. It's also, I'm going to switch over to just a flat out green because this is an autonomic function. It's specifically parasympathetic innervation of heart, lungs, and GI tract. Okay, so the green, this is just basic green color, and that is an autonomic function, and specifically the parasympathetic innervation for heart, lung, and GI tract. Okay, and then switching over to a general sensory function. So this is going to be a basic blue. It's going to be just a general sensation for your larynx and epiglottis. Okay, so that's just general sensation. Can you feel someone touching that area in the back of your throat, way back there? Okay, that's just going to be that blue color. So a little bit of sensory function, just a small area. And then there's also going to be some purple, and that's going to be taste. Taste from the base of the tongue and your epiglottis. Just a real small area of taste from cranial nerve number 10. It's like the base of your tongue, which is way far back there. Okay, as well as your epiglottis. Okay, and also in purple, again, it's not necessarily taste, but it's going to come from something that's involved in taste, and it's just going to be visceral sensation. From heart, lungs, and GI tract. Okay, so your vagus nerve actually travels way down through your heart, lungs, and your GI tract and picks up any general visceral sensation, any sensation arising out of your viscera. That's the response. Cranial nerve number 10 is responsible for that. This is the hard part. The mixed cranial nerves, there's lots of function. If you remember in general that 5 and 9 are mostly sensory and a little bit of motor, and 7 and 10 are mostly motor with a little bit of sensory, that can be helpful. And I think hopefully the colors will be helpful. I've been told that they're helpful before to connect with different nuclei, and we'll get there. That's, what's today? Is today Monday? Not good. It's Tuesday. Okay, yeah. This class used to be on Monday. On Thursday, we'll cover the nuclei part. Okay, any questions about this? Mixed cranial nerves, all the different functions. All right, hard part's over.